Good morning, and maybe it's good afternoon for you, or maybe it's good evening. My name is Vivian Acquah, the Workplace Wellness Advocate, and I advise managers with keeping their people healthy, happy, and safe. And today will be a full panel because we have so much to share, and it has to do with a prediction that all of us made last year for MHR, and it was about the future of work. I plan to do a remix session because we didn't anticipate COVID, we didn't anticipate the lockdown. So I'm going to introduce my panel members one by one and unmute them one by one so that they can join in this conversation. So the first one is Andrew Watson, Chief Technology Officer of MHR. Let me see where Andrew is. And the second one is Mark Williams. He is a Senior Vice President of Product. And Katrin Kircheis, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, then please help me, Katrin.
That's
Uh,
okay.
She's a learning and performance specialist at KiKa Training. And Garry Turner, he is the creator and the host of Value Through Vulnerability podcast. And last but not least is Rob Hind. And Rob is the chairman and director at HR in Law. Welcome all. Are you excited?
Yay!
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
So today it will be the remix of the world of work, and it's going to be about our 2020 predictions from the panel of experts. And the first question that I'm going to ask is the first question for the top of the tree. So what is the one trend that you expect to see across all businesses and industries in 2020? And I think that we have to add it 21 as well. I'll start with Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting time, and I think what we've seen is we've got plenty of communication tools, but not all of them do the jobs we want. So we've got plenty of these kind of tools, brilliant for certain situations. But what we found is with all the remote working, it's much harder to get real insight into what your workforce are doing, and we need better ways of doing that. We've seen a rise in interest in social and collaboration tools, but it's still a little bit one way. So I think the trend will continue with the ways we can get out to the workforce. I still think that bots will be important to us as a method of gathering information from our employees and then using that data. So a lot more real-time information from employees to understand what they're doing. And I think we'll see an awful lot more work in that. But we have to accept that we've got two different types of organizations. We've got the ones that accepted this kind of and got on with it quite well and just switched to remote working.
But they seem that those ones are more likely prepared for remote working, right?
Well, they're prepared for remote working, but they've now got the challenges of what's the balance when we get back, and they've probably seen an uprise in tool sets. So they're going to have to work out the balance for what those tool sets need to be when some people are back in the office and some people are still remote. So that's going to be an interesting time as you sort of pull all that together. And then you've got those that didn't cope so well and weren't quite ready, and their challenge will be actually implementing a lot of this stuff from the start. So they're going to have to play catch up, because I think we're in a new world. These kind of situations are going to happen again, and they're going to have to react quicker. You won't get a second chance.
True. Rob.
I have hopes, but I have worries and concerns as well, I must admit. Looking at my answer to the first question back at the end of last year, my main concern was the Brexit in terms of the commercial world and the potential skills shortage. I've been hugely impressed by how organizations have developed the agility and flexibility, and I hope that outlasts the current crisis, because crises generally demand agility, and I think organizations have responded to this really well and quicker than governments, in fact, certainly in certain countries. And crises generally ignite innovation, If you go back and look at how NASA performed in trying to get the Apollo 13 guys home following the explosion on board, look at the current situation where companies like Dyson and Formula One companies have completely re-diversified and have produced sort of ventilators within months to the crisis. So I think companies have broken the typical bureaucracies to get stuff done by the workers and down the line. And I think stuff is getting done and is being delegated to line managers. And whereas in normal working times, we're making 5 key decisions about innovation and development in a month, companies are now making 5 a day across their companies. But the worry is that, once the crisis is over, we'll return to the traditional command and control techniques until the next crisis. So, I would like to see companies maintaining agile systems. I think working remotely is very important with all of the stresses and strains and well-being issues that it brings in certain sectors. The service industries and professional services will be working remotely and from home for a long time to come, certainly for the rest of this year and in 2021. So whilst I hope that we maintain the current rate of development and innovation, I do hope that we don't lose that loving feeling, which has brought great communications and connection with workforces working remotely. And once companies get back to a semblance of normal, and once they're chasing new business and contracts, I hope that all of the previous corporate tensions don't kick in.
I totally agree. And I totally want to piggyback on what you said regarding the well-being, because last year I made a prediction that I hope that companies pay more attention to the well-being of their people. And with this current state that we are in right now, everybody, it doesn't matter in what level you are, if you're a director or if you are a mid-level employee or mid-level manager, everybody is being challenged regarding their mental health. And that's why I feel like companies need to find ways to provide toolkits for their employees. People are also being challenged when it comes to their financial health. So also provide some toolkits where people can create a better financial health. Another thing that I also want to reframe, because last year I mentioned something about buildings are becoming more healthier. We are putting, well standards on building, and this is going to be the new it, because now people are being asked to come back to the workplace, or some people really are craving that connection, so they are coming back to the office. But then again, how is the company providing a safe and healthy workplace? And I believe that is doing their best to nudge building owners to provide a healthy workplace where the ventilators, are working properly, so that at least people have a safe feeling, and provide guidelines to use the staircase, to use the lift, or maybe to provide flexibility when it comes to working from home or working in the office. So I see somebody saying hi. Josiah is saying hi. So hi, Josiah from LinkedIn from Israel. And I'm going to the next question. Apart from economic factors, what would be the biggest influences on the challenges in 2020? And I will start with Mark.
Much the same as Rob and Andrew were talking about, I think. I mean, because there's so many remote workers, and most people are looking at kind of teams A and B and interchanging those, we don't know whether there's going to be another spike. So we know that's going to be a kind of longer term thing. And I think most industries will start working like technical industries work now. So I think, so as Rob was saying, agile will be much more of a standard thing. You're much likely to have the rhythm of it with a stand up in the morning so that everybody knows. But I think the key bit, and the bit as I was reading through the questions that I kept coming back to is the clarity of goals. Setting goals is going to be setting very clear goals and letting people get on with it is going to be absolutely key to the whole of this next period. And we don't do it very well.
I have to say something. What do you mean with letting people get on with it? Is that an autonomy thing that you're referring to?
Yeah, so try not to micromanage. I'll talk a bit more about micromanaging kind of a bit later on. But I think that the danger is, because if the trust isn't there or not getting, because productivity and leanness are going to be so important, that managers will be super sensitive to, that they'll be wanting to make sure everything gets done. So they've got a pressure from the kind of the top of the business, and they have to mitigate it for everybody else and try and be calm and let people get on with it. But which is difficult. Managers get a hard time, I think, because that's a real difficult balance to take. But I think the key to kind of creating that balance is the clarity, is making sure that clarity of agreed goals, and then just a very, Andrew will know that the productivity at MHR didn't go down in the engineering department, and that's because we've already got in place that kind of feedback loop and just letting people get on with it. So I think that's going to be really important.
Katrin.
Yeah, I can only agree with Mark, and for me, nothing much has changed from my previous answer, because it is all about trusting your employees. Last year I said that it would be the ability to implement structures that provide employees with that trust, with more freedom to do their job in a way they see fit. And this was always going to pose a big challenge if companies, for example, struggled to let go of and distribute power. But I think what happened in the first half of this year has kind of sped up that whole thing, because now the challenge will be kind of like getting back on track, but also looking forward and really figuring out a sustainable way of working. Because, and I know a lot of people always say they want to go back to normal, but what was back to normal? Back to normal means a lot of stress for people. You are forced to commute. You have to pretend you work 8 hours straight. It's just not sustainable. So I'm hoping that we are going to look into kind of a new different, and what Mark said, it's going to be a massive challenge with managers who micromanage anyways in the office already, and they're now even more so focused on what's my workforce doing at home. Are they really working, or are they spending time with their family? It's that trust thing.
I even read an article where in the States, I can only say this about the States, where managers had the access to their computers, to their the team members' computers, where they monitor if they are doing the job. And I'm just like, okay, but who has the time to look at those things, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it, we are agiles, and a lot of people trained for that job. They went to university. They want to do a good job. They want to do well. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Garry.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of emotion in me, to be honest with you. Like, just building on what everyone else has said already so far for me, Vivian, I think it really is this paradigm shift. If we think about where we were even 8 weeks ago, there were belief systems around we can't have HR, finance working from home. Yeah. And within 4 weeks, everybody was working from home. So like these belief systems that we've held on to for generations are shattered. So I think for me, I spoke about at the end of last year around the fact that we need to be really careful that we get away from, similar to Mark, these fixed mindsets. We call it micromanagement as business language, but basically it's a fixed mindset. The belief that human beings do not have the ability to grow. Yeah, that's what fixed mindset is for me. And I think what we've now got is this massive opportunity, both at business but also societal level, to truly allow every person to be seen. And we've got the technology now, like MHR, like People First, like so many other platforms, to allow everybody to be seen. So my challenge is, do leaders actually have the gumption and the courage to actually follow through with that now they've got the opportunity?
I would encourage every manager, every leader, every employee to really look up the TEDx from 𝗪𝗪𝗺 regarding fixed mindset and growth mindset, because this situation asks for a growth mindset. We need that at the moment to react agile. especially when there is another wave coming on, right? So it's a good bridge to the next question. So what can leaders do to support their team members during this new way of working? And I'll start again with Andrew.
A lot's been said already. I think it comes back to trust is the bedrock of everything that we're talking about in here, and I don't think that changes. So we've got to take that forward. And I think for leaders, and myself included in this, I think it's been one of the hardest periods. I think, as Mark said, our software engineers at MHR haven't reduced any productivity. In fact, I'd argue that maybe they're probably a little bit more productive than they were, because they haven't got somebody walking around asking them questions all the time. Then it's a bit easier to exclude themselves. And it's been much harder for the leadership team to be able to keep the information about what's going on. And it's that balance between micromanagement and just knowing generally that things are running okay. So how do we get that balance right? So I think, to be honest, from a leader point of view, a lot of that trust comes from us being honest with our employees about maybe how difficult we're finding it to gain that information. And they will understand from our point of view then what information they should be giving back. Because they probably need to see it from our side as well, and understand those difficulties that we have. We can't just leave everything. Mark's right. We've got to set good goals and objectives, but they've got to be much more short term, and people can just get on with that work. And then we're getting the feedback, very, very clear feedback about those goals and objectives.
Can I interrupt you a bit? Yeah. Because you said something that I feel like the people in the back didn't hear it, and especially when it comes to short-term goals. So can you repeat it again so that the people who might not be hearing this clearly can hear this?
Sorry, I don't understand that question, Vivian. Say it again.
You said something that is worth mentioning, and I want to put an emphasis on it. So regarding the short-term goals, you said something that I want you to repeat again. That's it.
Okay. What that we need to set the short-term goals.
Yes.
Yeah. I think a lot of what we do is much too long-term. We set an objective of delivering a piece of software to do X, Y, and Z, or a delivery system, and it's just within those teams. And we can break that down much more effectively, and we're pretty good at that within our agile working and our day-to-day sort of stand-ups. But I wonder whether that gets fed down well enough across the teams. And I think when someone's got a very clear objective in them, they know what they've got to deliver for that day, it makes life an awful lot more easy. And if that gets fed back to us in a better way, as leaders, we don't have to spend as much time chasing up our employees and finding out what's going on. And I think that goes back to those tool sets that we need to actually keep track of what is going on. That would make life a lot easier. And I think it goes back to the trust piece, then we can just let people get on.
Yeah. And Rob?
No, I agree with Andrew. I mean, I come from a background in HR within the legal sector and professional services, where historically short-term profit and gain has always been the main commercial driver. And that does worry me in terms of how organisations, particularly within service sectors, will treat their people fairly and equally as real stakeholders in the business, and not just as tools for profit. I think yes, there's been an increase in transparency of communications within organisations, and therefore the trust element with people working from home. But it's we're all to an extent in results-based industries and sectors. So I think there's still a lot of pain and suffering to come. We've got the furlough scheme in the UK, which is government funded. I wait with bated breath to see what will happen within organisations who are going to be managing the change and organisational change within their companies once that comes to an end.
What are you fearing for? What is your fear, your biggest fear regarding this?
Well, I just fear swathes of casualties and redundancies within organisations who have, without doubt, been hit tremendously financially. We're slightly more fortunate in the service sector and industries because we've been able to function working from home. But those in-person sectors such as retail, catering, hospitality, who have been hugely hit during this crisis, are being supported by the government scheme at the moment. So I think there is a lot of pain and suffering still to come our way and come the way of employees, unfortunately.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I want to because you all mentioned something about supporting team members while doing the new way of working. So I want to say something else regarding supporting those who are made redundant, who are being financially challenged. And even though you have made somebody redundant, know that you can create an ambassador for life if you do that respectfully, if you give them something to do or a package where they can upskill their talents or upskill their skills or learn something new to become to find a job during these economical challenging times. I feel there is so much to do when it comes to L&D. And there's definitely something that I think that Uber did, or at least an American huge company did, for the people that they made redundant. They at least paid their healthcare for 1 year, but also they were allowed to access an online learning platform. So find ways to help those who are out of jobs. And maybe they might be coming up as an ambassador within a few years in your company. You never know, or they speak positive about your company. So please find ways to do that, humanized, and to help them in that transition.
I think that might be something that we see coming back a little bit, about how people will assess the organisations they work for. How were people treated during this period? And were being furloughed, but were you supported? Were you called regularly? It does lead to redundancy, exactly as you say. So there will be a little bit more. Maybe not just the bright lights will attract people these days to their sort of all the VC investments. It will be much more about we were really supported as employees in that organisation during difficult times.
I think that also applies, Andrew, in the commercial arena and the business development arena. I think MHR in particular have been very good in, whilst not driving direct sales to their customers and contacts, you've been there. Companies that are there to help, support, provide information and whatever guidance and assistance throughout this crisis, then they're the companies that will be remembered out there when this is all over. And
those other companies as well,
people will come back to you. It's a bit like the training organisation that I run, People in Law, formerly HR in Law. We're out there to support our membership at the moment and provide whatever guidance and assistance and resources we can provide.
I mean, that's the humanized way of supporting others at the moment, right? And I think that people will remember that gesture. They will remember what you did for them in a crisis, so that they know that how they can support you when the crisis is over. So going to the next question, beyond technology, how will companies deepen their connections with employees this year? And I'll start with Mark. Sorry.
I think, excuse me. I think we've touched on it before. I think sharing the financial data of the organization is going to be really important, because the kind of openness of, this is where we're at. And I think doing that with your workforce is really it's one way that everybody can understand the situation that you're in, and also opening up the sales pipeline. A lot of companies don't like to say what's going on in their sales pipeline, but I think the staff can get involved in a way that, you know, that if everybody knows this is the focus that we're going for, I think that's really unifying as well. It's, you know, sales is kind of a dirty kind of word, but I think it's really good so that everybody can be optimistic about, well, this is what we're trying to do, and this is where we're going, and even when it gets hard, and it will be hard for the majority of businesses, I think just having that background knowledge, it even helps when you know, if you have to make redundancies and other things, at least you're doing it in a way that everybody understands.
Yeah, instead of just firing somebody and then later saying that we otherwise had to kill the company or lose the company. So
yeah, like it's a black box that you know, only a few people are peering into, because it's just counterproductive, I think.
Yeah. Katrin.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about being transparent, specifically about the sales funnel and unifying people in a new purpose almost. Because if you have that purpose and if you make it clear to your employees, that comes back into what we said before with really clear communication about this is what we're doing, these are the goals, and everyone having their part in that bigger picture. I mean, that's a general thing that you should do anyways, but by having that bigger purpose, you are able to move forward as kind of like a unity. The other thing is probably that hopefully there will be a more compassionate approach. I mean, obviously there are companies, as you said in your example yourself, from the American company that might move the other direction and monitor more, but hopefully by having gone through this crisis together, there will be more of an understanding for each other and then everyone's circumstances, which hopefully has a connection that will last beyond the crisis as well. So building these trusting relationships by opening up mutually, so that the company opens up the transparency and the purpose going forward. And I've seen a lot of examples where people have opened up within their teams and just, you know, shared a lot more things with them, how they are doing and what's going on in their lives as well. And that has been really, really good for a lot of people. So I'm hoping that will carry beyond what's going on at the moment. I will not be forgotten.
Yeah. And I totally can relate regarding that, that you shared about being there for your people, because again, we have social media, we have different platforms where people share. If you're not there or if you're not taking good care of them, they will express it in various ways, and that's not the thing that you want, especially during now, especially when a new talent comes on board and is asking the question, how did you support your people during this crisis? They can find out.
Yeah,
Garry.
it's all about reputation. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Garry.
Yeah, excuse me. The thing that's coming up most for me is actually around, excuse me, it is that human piece, what Katrin just spoke to. So it's great to have the tech, it's great to have the platforms, but if you haven't got human leaders listening, empathizing, taking the time to know their people, we'll continue to reinforce the issues we've had the last 100 years. So I think we've got to be really, really careful and cognizant as we do re-emerge, that we are emerging together, because D&I is actually more of a problem today than it was 8 weeks ago. Those people that are on the fringes are even further on the fringes at the moment, because it's even more difficult to access that voice. So I think it's really exciting, but it's also, we need to be really cognizant that there's a really big opportunity to truly see and hear everyone. And we use it with technology, and we do it as leaders, but I think that role modeling piece that Katrin spoke to, you know, are we actually showing more of our true selves? Are our leaders actually saying, I really struggled with this during the crisis? You know, that's going to build trust. That's going to build your pipeline. That's going to build your culture as you go forward, as if we have leaders showing up more fully and not hiding behind the tools and the tech. So I think the tech's important, but we don't want to allow the tech to, tech's meant to serve humans, not the other way around. And I think we need to be really careful that we don't rely on tech to do the job of the human.
Thank you.
Well, I think to kind of pick up on that, maybe. So I think trust is made up of two parts. It's kind of competence and character. And I think so. You've still got to, whether the tech irrelevant, you've still got to give people clarity about what they want to do, and that's the competent part. You can have somebody who's very nice, but you still have no idea what you're doing as a job, you know. And so it's those two things together that make that make it work for an employee.
Yeah, I'd love to just very quickly come back. So it's actually really good timing you challenge that, Mark, because some of the stuff I'm looking at is actually there's 4 main components that underpin trust, which is actually benevolence, predictability, ability, and competence, as you say. So there is actually a lot of behavioral science behind how you create trust in environments. So I fully accept the challenge, and I guess where I come through with this lens is that heart-based part, that benevolence part is the bit we haven't focused on. We're focused on the ability, we're focused on predictability. We haven't focused on connecting on a human level. And I think that is the gap in the trust quotient for me. But that's just my lens, and I would love to be challenged.
No, I'm agreeing with you, because that's also one of the reasons why I started this platform, Let's Humanize the Workplace, which was already decreasing before COVID. And I wanted to, you know, still continue with these episodes to really emphasize that now more than ever, we need the human factor back in the workplace. So coming to the next question. What will your HR/people focus be in 2020? And I will extend that to 2021. And I'll start with Andrew.
Yeah, so we've got the challenge of the situation we've got to get through, and then determine what the new normal is, whatever that is. So whatever we're in now is not normal. So we've got to get through that and get settled into whatever needs to be in place. And the HR focus, I think, for me is how do we make remote work truly work? I, for one, I miss people. I need people around me. The remote stuff is all very well, and yes, we can do the video call, but I kind of need a bit of the banter in the office. So how do we replace that? How do we keep that going and bring that human element to the workplace all the time? The bit of fun that needs to be there.
Would it be helpful to have, you know, I'm envisioning Star Wars where somebody's being teleported into the office, where you can see somebody they don't have to be there to be present, but just teleport them so that you at least see a vision of them, and then you can have that conversation. Would that help?
I don't know. It's all still a bit too electronic and a bit too far out there, isn't it? The conversations that happen in person, direct, face to face, are so much more meaningful. And you properly read expressions, you can properly read body language, you can understand the stress. The water cooler conversation is just as important to me as a leader. Just a quick 5-minute, 2-minute chat with somebody is so much more important. Those have all gone at the minute. I'm not having those, except maybe just that very short interval at the beginning of a video conference when there's 2 people on and it happens to be the person you want to talk to. You can have a very quick, intimate, but it's not quite the same, and I don't get the body language. So from a human resources point of view and that management point of view, that's where most of my feedback comes from my employees. And you look around the office and you can see who's struggling. You can see who might need a little pep talk or a little chat. We haven't got that. So how do we bring that back? And I think that's going to be really important for remote workers. And how do we also get the true innovation meetings going again, because they don't quite work remotely. The true out there thinking. I think you have to be a little bit closer together. We've got a long way to go, but it's way beyond 2020.
Yeah. Would it be helpful to plan your meetings maybe outside or in a park? Or I'm not sure. Are you allowed to gather with more than 2 people?
I think we're moving up to 6 from
moving up to 6 shortly.
Okay.
From Monday. So yeah, that would help.
Yeah. And Rob?
Well, I think HR has managed very well in terms of the stabilizing what is suddenly a virtual workforce. everything can be done from recruitment, induction, onboarding, and all of the HR processes can be and are being carried out remotely. And I think HR has stepped up to the plate in terms of the organisation of people working virtually within companies across the country, and they've done really well. But I think that we're still in the honeymoon period of this working from home. And what concerns me, and I'm sure Katrin will talk about it in a bit more detail and with a bit more knowledge, is we need to stabilise the workforce. The well-being issue of working remotely is the biggest issue for me. That I'm going stir-fry crazy, and I work for myself and only with a couple of individuals. I miss that interaction, as Andrew said. And I think retaining well-being over a protracted, lengthy period of time is the biggest challenge that companies and HR are going to face over the next 6 months or a year.
Sorry.
I totally agree, and I wanted to mention something about it anyway, because I read in an article that what the World Economic Forum shared is that the World Health Organization already shared that the next pandemic will not be COVID, it will be burnout, and it will be stress. Stress and burnout is going to be over the roof. And you have to be mindful that, okay, people are dealing with this new normal and they are working from home. They are doing their best to get the job done. But what you don't know is the moment that they shut down their computer, how are they? Are they tired? Are they feeling stressed? Are they feeling, are they, are their batteries empty? Because if that happens every day, week in, week out, month in, month out, they will end up burning sooner than later. And then you will see that instead of having 10 people working for you, you might be ending up with only 2 people working for you. So that's why I want to really emphasize, but also ask managers, leaders to be mindful and provide toolkits so that people can become more resilient, especially regarding the mental well-being, but also find toolkits where they can recharge themselves. We need that off time. So Andrew mentioned he wanted those coffee minutes, right? So those 5 minutes that you're standing chatting with a colleague. These minutes are essential for us to recharge ourselves and for us to become, for us to do our work. And I also want to add into something regarding the remote working, because I've noticed that a lot of companies have been saving, no more cost for traveling. Some of the companies here in Netherlands even ended their contracts for the office space. That's a whole lot of savings. And I am just asking just a small piece to invest back in the people, invest in their office space, invest in their home office space so that they can buy the proper chairs, the proper computer, the proper desktop. And even if they can borrow some from the workplace, do that. Provide the right tools for them to work in the right way, so that they don't become stuck 8 hours on their chair. And at the end of the day, the end of the season, they are going to the doctor because their back is aching or their head are aching.
Google.
Sorry.
Yeah, Katrin?
It's a really good point about, companies might get rid of their office spaces. They have to be really careful with that, though, because not everyone can work from home. Not everyone might have their own room they can work in. It's fair enough that, yes, you can buy all of the equipment, but you might have someone else already working from home. I think it needs to be about choices. If someone wants to go in the office, let them go in the office. It might just be a smaller office space. There will still be savings. But it needs to be about choices going forward. Sorry, just wanted to butt in there.
We saw that Google have announced, they're going to have an allowance for furniture for home workers, and I think other companies will follow. But I do go back to the point that this is not normal, and the other stresses of life just aren't there at the moment. Yes, there's the concern about what's going on with the pandemic. take my situation, and my children are doing their schoolwork from home.
Yeah, but you have older children.
I've got older children, and
there are also parents with younger children who have stressors. I'm not talking about experience. Yes, I am.
Right. Yeah, and we've seen that, and plus I'm not coming home and having to take my kids to club, school clubs, and whatever else they do outside of that. There's nothing else going on. So my work-life balance at the moment is probably as good as it's ever been, in the fact that I'm doing exactly the same amount of hours work, but I haven't got the stresses outside of work that I would normally have. So I think when we get back to a situation where the other life is continuing and those other stresses are in place, it's going to be a very different situation. My kids come home from school at 3:30 and they're nowhere near as calm as they are now when they get home. And if I'm working at home, that's very hard. So there are other things to consider here about what will be the future.
I think there are other cases where, yes, with childcare issues. I know a case where, you know, I'm working with somebody at the moment who's having to work from 6:30 in the morning until 2:00 because of childcare issues. Her husband works for a US bank, so he's looking after the children in the morning, and he then works from 2:00 till 10 or midnight. So yeah, there are huge stresses in arrangements like that. But I think you know, I think we're in a position to be able to control our own time and sort of working day to a certain extent, but you know, possibly lower down the sort of pyramid. There is a blurring of work and sort of home life where people are having to stay logged onto their computers until late at night for fear of you know, not completing their work, or you know, is my boss going to be calling me, and should I be prepared to sort of deal with this? And I think a lot of people are working very, very long hours sitting in front of their computer at the moment.
I agree. And also remember that I also read an article about a lot of women are sacrificing their careers to stay at home because they can't balance, you know, teaching the kids and also working at the time. So a lot of women have said they want to work less hours or even said goodbye to working because of this situation. And this was bringing back, how are we still maintaining the traditional roles in home? So I'm also looking at the guys, not these guys, but just the guys in general, to support your spouses during these challenging times as well. So next question for Mark. What do you hope leaders, managers will learn from this new way of working?
Well, before I answer specifically the question, it's very unusual that a crisis will bring in a change of behavior. Normally, it just locks in what the behavior was before the crisis. And so if leaders were already forward-thinking, empathic, then they tend to kind of lead that through. It's very unusual for leaders to then have a crisis and change in the middle of that crisis where the pressure is on. So I think although we're hopeful about how people will react to the crisis, I also think it depends on how long it goes on. If this is the kind of the end of the first wave, if the end of the first wave is it, then I think people can quite easily just think, that was just an anomaly. We don't have to change behavior. But I think if if this is a very long term, and by that I mean over a year, then I think we will see more concreted behavior. But I wanted to come back to what I was saying before. It's not having to micromanage. So I think that's going to be one thing where I think I hope that people learn not to do that. But in order to do that, why do people micromanage? We need to get into the nitty-gritty of it. Comes back to setting good goals. And so if you haven't got people who are performing, then how can you tell that? And without micromanagement, it all comes down to clear goal setting. Do you understand it? Have we got a shared understanding of what I'm asking you to do? And then dealing with it afterwards. So I think there are some structural things that we have to solve in order to end micromanagement. But obviously, as I say, a lot of it will be stuck in from the start because that's the way they've always done it. And it'll only be coming out of that. What we were talking about before about reputation as to how you've handled a crisis, I think in high unemployment, which is a period that we're going into, companies don't have to say yes. They don't have to be nice to their employees because they always will have employees. But what it will mean is when we come out of that dip, people will remember. And so I think there will be a kind of binary thing going on where some companies will be good to their employees, be transparent. They won't feel it in the short term, the benefit of it necessarily, but they will feel it long term. And I think the opposite will happen. You will get companies who just tie it down, don't really give a monkeys, and survive in the short term, but the long term, they just don't fit into that area.
Yeah. Katrin.
Yeah, there's not much I can add, I guess. But,
yes, you can.
I am hoping that it will be that, you know, people can be trusted and they don't have to be chained to their desks from 9 to 5. But maybe shifting away the focus from the whole crisis as well as last year, I did say that the future workforce, they won't put up with micromanagement anymore. No. And you know, Mark, you rightly said so. It's unfortunately this whole crisis has shifted to perspective from this year was going to be kind of like a more of an employee picks their employer kind of thing, where they could really ask, why should I work for you? What's your unique selling point for my talent to be employed by you? But this will come. It will come. And as you said as well, it might take a while longer now, but companies will really need to shift their focus on how can they attract new talent. But more importantly for me is that how can they retain their talent? How can they retain the people? And it really comes back to that compassion piece of hopefully they have learned a bit more about their employees. Hopefully they have asked questions other than how are you doing, expecting the same old answer. Yeah, I'm good. Going into a bit more detail, what are you struggling with? What's going on outside of work for you? How are you dealing with the kids, the dogs, the spouses? Have you murdered each other already? Stuff like that. And hopefully that connection stays. So yeah, I'm really hoping that we will go through a lot more things this year. I'm not hoping for that. I know we will go, even if the crisis ends, I don't know, at the end of next month, everything goes kind of back to normal in certain areas. The second part of the year, we will still go through a lot of things. And Vivian, as you said, kind of looking into 2021, yeah, we will probably have to deal with a lot more changes on the way. But hopefully coming out of this as human society, we will have grown a bit with this. A lot of us, hopefully. Yeah.
I hope so. And Garry?
Yeah, really to echo Katrin's point, really, I just, the thing I can see, I think it's a lot about co-creation. I want to pull some of Mark's comments and Katrin's together, really, is that I think part of the move towards less micromanagement, as well as what Mark said, is actually co-creating the future. So it's not about leadership having to say, we're going this direction, but it also takes accountability from those across the organization. So I see the organization structure flipping more left and right rather than top and down, and almost having this more left and right communication, iteration, communication. And I'm seeing good examples of that happening. And I think that's a really conscious thing to have to do, though. And I think what we're all talking about, I feel today, is are we going to stay conscious? Because that's what we are right now at this critical time. And are we going to wander back into unconscious situations in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time? Or are we going to take the accountability, both individually and collectively, to stay awake? And that's what's going on right now for me, is actually the business has to be done 100%. But there is a consciousness shift. There is an awakening. Going to sound a bit spiritual now, but there are people that are looking inside themselves right now going, am I in the right job? Am I with the right partner? Do I want to be doing this the rest of my life?
It's a reflection period.
It's huge. But there's friends of mine, there's family of mine, there's work colleagues. So yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, that power is going back to the employer. Not unfortunately, the balance is swinging back in the short term. but we've all got a responsibility to keep this conscious conversation going. And I think co-creation is a key part of this, because we are innately agile. We are innately connected. We are innately well before we start getting afraid and fearful and hiding and all of these other dysfunctions that happen in the workplace. So if we can just meet with each other where we're at more often, and that's side by side, not up and down, I truly believe that behavior change can stick. But it's going to take every one of us being conscious and not falling back into that trap.
Yeah, I agree.
I think responsibility is a really good point here, because it's not the sole responsibility of employers to change what's going forward. If you involve your employees, you can, you don't have to stress out over what do we do going forward? How can I make it good for everyone? Just involve people, and you will be off a lot better going forward.
I just wanted to ask Garry a question. You made that point about, we are innately quite agile as humans. The danger is in the workplace, we sometimes get very stale. We get, the norm sets in. I think obviously when the pandemic first hit, there was a lot of uncertainty, and then we went through that period of moving into the remote working, and actually it went really well. And I think people, do work well in a crisis, and they do cope with change. And actually the change, if you get the change levels right in an organization, it drives better behavior. I'm not saying we need a pandemic and we don't need to sort of disasters all the time, but we do need a constant challenge. And I think what this has shown for leaders as well is to get that balance right into driving. Just wondered if, driving that kind of change all the time and just keeping it a little bit edgy. What are your thoughts on it?
If I may come back on that, Vivian. So I think absolutely, but I think there's a really fine line between stretch and stress. And that's what we need to be cognizant again of is, and again, how do you know if our people, Andrew, are feeling stressed or stretched? You've got to talk to them. And I think that's been the gap, is change is done to people far too often. They're not taken with them on the journey. And funny enough, if they don't mind me saying, I'm actually writing a book called Change is an Inside Job about this very topic right now, because through my own lived experience, just to share very quickly, I was bullied as a kid, self-harmed at uni, none of that matters, but there's stories I told myself. And until I started acknowledging those stories, processing them and being okay to talk about them, they stayed up there. So when I look at political leaders around the world, senior leaders of organizations, most of us have got stories we haven't dealt with. And that for me is the nugget between where we are and where we could be, is that ability to own our story, share our story, but also connect on a human level. Because the more we do that, then we can tap back into that innatedness, I think, Andrew. The more we can just show up more fully, the more everybody else does the same.
True. I also have a comment to share, and then I think that I'm going to ask you with a final tip or something that you would share, a final thought seed that you want to plant in people's minds. So I'm going to share this, and in the meantime, you can think about your thought seed. So Daniela Faletti, thank you for sharing this. And she's saying, Katrin, focus on retaining talent would increase and indeed the attraction. Companies often ask me to help them for their attraction before thinking of retention. Yes, that's a good thing. I also see that Garry shared a couple of statements. So trust is the bedrock here. And he's saying, hi, Josiah. So thank you. And Rob, what is your thought seed? What do you want to plant in people's minds?
My hope is that we take the best out of this crisis, and it's been a period of huge disruption. It's the most disruptive thing to happen in our sort of lives, I think, and we take the best out of the agility and flexibility that we are managing at the moment, with the best out of work life. I mean, I'm very much old school and sort of love being in the office and love having that interaction of being around other people. So my hope is that we can take the best of what we're doing at the moment with the best of being surrounded by your co-workers within the office place going forward.
Andrew?
Well, fundamentally, I suppose I am a technologist at heart, but the danger here is that we run to technology to solve a solution. Technology will be extremely important to us and having the right tools and framework, which we've discussed through this, but they've got to enhance our work life. And so it's the right social collaboration tools. And I think we've got to find the way that we get better feedback from employees, the tool set that is a continual aid to someone that's feeding back to us as an organization, how our employees are feeling on a day-to-day basis. And then as leaders, how can we use that information to make better decisions to support us? And I think technology will be important, but I think a lot of organizations will dive to technology and there'll be too much of it. And we've got to get the balance right.
Mark.
Just reiterating what I've said before, really set measurable goals and follow them up empathically. Everybody's home situation is going to be different. And I think, you know, we can't treat employees as a blanket, same for everybody. We need to be understanding who they are. And I think it comes back to what Andrew was saying. We need to know who they are in order to then know how best to get that balance. But the key to unmicromanaging is to set those goals well.
Katrin?
Yes, I think it's all about the relationship you have with your employees. I know a lot of people always say that your people are your most important asset. It's actually the relationship you have with them. And kind of think about your relationships you have outside of work. Would you treat your family and friends the same way that you treat some of your employees? So look at it as a relationship you have with an actual person. And I think that might change the mindset a little bit. So be a bit more mindful of that.
Yes. Garry?
Yeah, for me, Vivian, it's just stay curious. Like at home and at work, just keep challenging beliefs of yourself and others in a healthy way, have the debates, but know we're all accountable jointly. And it isn't just down to leaders to make sure that this happens going forward. It's down to all of us.
I mean, also, I know that a lot is on the shoulders of leaders at the moment. So I would say leaders also need support. Leaders also need help, and know that, you know, there are a lot of people out there that are supporting leaders. So know that you don't have to do it alone. And regarding to my thought seed is really pay attention to your people when it comes to their mental well-being or when it comes to their financial well-being, and know that together you can do this, right? We are in it together, but as long as you know how to treat your people, trust your people, support them, and also be transparent during these times, I think then and only then will you get the most out of people. So I would like to say thank you for all the panel members. I really love this conversation. And if it was up to me, I would do this for hours, but we can't. We have to be mindful of our Zooming and our virtual meeting, but know that this, I'm happy with the remix and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. And thank you for watching, and maybe next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.